So we have a lovely surprise for this month. So you guys know that we have Vivanterre wines, but I actually have Cedric from the Vivanterre team with me today to do the tastings. So I don't even know if you know the Cedric, but getting these wines for us has been about a year in the making. So I've been working with y'all for a while to actually get some of these and set this up. So we're super excited to have it. And we have all the wines, but for our club members, most of them are going to be getting the orange, which we'll talk about. And then our red club members will be getting the Gamay, of course. So we're excited to just kind of learn a little bit more about that from you. And then we'll do some tastings and give some recommendations for the club members and just learn a little about it. So first, I'd just love to hear a little bit about you, and then we can jump into Vivanterre, all the partners, et cetera, from there.
Cool. Well, thanks so much for having me, and thanks so much for carrying the wines. I know, like you said, the process has been long. The circumstances around getting the wines in the States the last couple of years, the first 2 years, has been more difficult than we ever imagined. So thanks for your patience. So I'm Cedric. I am my title is the wine director of Vivanterre. My other previous title was a wine director of 11 Madison Park. I was a wine director there for 5 years. I've now since moved into a different role within the company that owns 11 Madison Park. I'm a wine lover. I love everything about wine. I love talking about it. So please feel free to tell me to quiet down if I'm going too long.
I say the same thing. Like my friends are like, "You're good. Like actually, we're done with the wine talk now."
It's like funny at a party at the beginning, and then after a while,
yeah, they're like, actually, we've drank enough now that we're done with this part.
Yeah. And so my background is much more in very classic wines, but I think especially with the catalyst of this project, but maybe because of my interest in wine in general, I've taken a real interest in all wines, including those that lean on the natural side, as Vivanterre does. So Vivanterre is a collaboration project and is a really fun group of people, which is why I ultimately decided to get involved. The people are super interesting and really amazing to work with and to learn from. So on one side, so I'm sort of like squarely in the middle, clearly not the most important, and if anything, the least important, but in the middle, and I'll illustrate why I say that. On one side, you have Patrick, who's our winemaker, who lives in France. He's the one who actually does basically all the hard work. That is the winemaking. If anyone has ever gone to harvest or worked in a winery, it is backbreaking, hard, physical labor that when you're actually the actual winemaker is actually like also a lot of science. So not only backbreaking labor, we're also like really using brain at the same time. On the other side,
you casually say Patrick, and like this is like a very famous natural winemaker. Sure. Y'all are already besties, but like it's very hard to get wine from Patrick, period, in the US. So that's why it was also really exciting to get something from this project, because he is so like famous and hard to pin down because his stuff is amazing.
Yeah. So Patrick Beaujolais is the winemaker. He is the proprietor of Domaine La Bohème in Auvergne, France. He makes insanely delicious wines. I think the wine he's most famous for is maybe the Festihar, his Gamay. But what really was the linchpin for me, we tasted when I first went to the winery and spent some time with him and my other partners. We tasted some Muscadet and some Beaujolais. Literally, the Beaujolais that we tasted, called Super B, is the catalyst of why we have a red wine.
Yeah, I love that wine. I know that one.
Yeah, it was amazing. And, as somebody who runs a fancy restaurant, Beaujolais seems like it's out of place, but I love Beaujolais. And so we at 11 Madison Park have like 75, maybe more SKUs of Beaujolais on the list.
Wow.
And, varying ages and varying styles. And so I was really excited to drink it. And every time he opened a bottle, we took a tank sample of the things he had fermenting. Everyone was like, wow, this wine is amazing. And we were at the dinner, we were talking about like what we wanted to do and what the project looked like. And I was like, we should definitely make some red wine. And so that's how the red evolved. And then on that trip, we also tasted what's called M, which is his Muscadet, which when we talked about making wine in the second year, I was like, can we get some of that Muscadet that you're making? Because that would be amazing, because that wine is also delicious. So that's a little bit of background on that. So my other partners are Rosie and Max Asulin, who run the eponymous Rosie Asulin fashion company. Very beautiful, creative, insane clothes. I know nothing about fashion, so
Me neither.
that's like literally all I got to offer on that.
Yeah.
I just know the clothes are beautiful, and Rosie is creative, and the way her mind works is not the way my mind works at all, as a positive. And so working with her has been really, really amazing, and I've learned so much just on creative processes and thinking out of the box, and it's just been a really awesome process to go along through with her. So that's a little bit of background about myself. And so, like I said, I'm in the middle. Rosie and Max on one side. I say this to them, so I'll say it to everyone. They don't know a lot about wine. It's actually insane how much they've learned, and not being their background, like how much they actually know about wine now. I'll take credit and say that at least 30% of what they've learned is directly from me. But they really spent the time to like really like dive in and learn. And so I translate their creative ambition and thoughts to Patrick, both into more technical wine talk, but also into French, because Patrick doesn't speak a lot of English. I speak French-ish, I'm mostly fluent, kind of. And so that's why I say that I'm like squarely in the middle of the project.
Nice. And how did you guys get hooked up with, how'd you get hooked up with basically all those sides? Did you already know each other, or?
Yeah, so I say it in the most comical way possible. It's all through SoulCycle.
Really? Oh my gosh, that is an amazing story. I'm so glad I asked.
Yeah. So my amazing wife is an avid fitness junkie, and so is Rosie's sister. And so between their friendship, the circle kind of grew, and then Max and Rosie were around, and we got to know each other, and then they like kind of pestered me for, we'll call it, a couple years before I would have finally agreed to join the project. I was reluctant. I know the amount of hard work that something like this would take, and I just wasn't sure I was ready to take on the responsibility and the work and whatnot. And so I was very reluctant to get involved. And then I think after spending a weekend in France with Patrick Beaujolais and his partner Justine, and then Max and Rosie, my sort of thought had always been the best part of the wine world has always been the people that I get to meet, and the opportunities that those people present. And I wouldn't be being true to myself if I didn't at least explore this further. So that's kind of how it happened.
And then who knew Patrick, or did you guys just reach out to him?
They Max and Rosie, a friend of a friend of a friend sort of situation that we just kind of, and I think in the wine world, and I can speak to this personally, and I'll put my thoughts into Patrick, is you meet a lot of wine people all the time, and it's like very insular, and it's just like one wine person after another, and it's sort of like I'm like, is there anyone else in the world that's not involved in the wine trade that I can actually talk to? And so I think Patrick was very excited that Max and Rosie came from a very different background, and their, like I said, their creative process and their outlook on things. I think he was excited to potentially collaborate with someone that wasn't specifically from the wine world, and that's kind of how that happened.
Awesome. And I'll just put in a little caveat here too, because like it's interesting. I've been doing like a lot of interviews lately about like the clean wine movement, and then there's all this discussion of like celebrity wine, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the first things I talked to Max about when we first talked to y'all was that I was like, I just think that like y'all are just like such a great example of like how stuff like that can be done right. Like y'all aren't part of the clean wine movement. That's just kind of like a secondary thing, but like it kind of goes hand in hand with like the like celebrity aspect of things. And I just think it's like so important, because like I basically was like, there's like a little checklist, and like y'all just kind of made the checklist of doing things right, like ensuring there's like people from the wine world that like truly know what they're doing, naming who and where the wine's always coming from so that it's traceable back, and then just like being incredibly transparent about how it's being made, what's going into it. And then of course add the sexy bottle and all the other stuff that natural wine's super famous and hypey for, and like that's just like a great combination versus masking any of those things or trying to act like it's something different than it is. That's just like I feel like where it falls off of the wagon of like being a part of the natural wine community. And I feel like y'all just did such a great job with that, and that's why like y'all have had such great adoption like in the natural wine world, and it makes me excited because I feel like there's a lot more space for that, and this is just like a really good example of it.
Totally. I thank you for saying all that, because I think all of those things were important. We wanted to make something legitimate, and I'm opinionated. I'm a sommelier, so I have lots of but the clean wine movement is something totally different than the natural wine thing, and it's just about like buzzwords that don't mean anything. And I kind of think the term natural wine doesn't really mean anything,
Yeah.
but the clean wine like actually doesn't mean anything because I don't know, and the celebrity wine thing, and Rosie, and the reason I got involved is because it was very innocent. Like they were just like, we love this wine, we want to be involved, and we want to be creative and like make something. And it wasn't about like trying to like intrude into this world that didn't belong in or whatever. And so working with them that way has been really important. And then the ethos behind the project is that everyone is a partner, right? Like no one's getting a paycheck from this project. I mean, that's not totally true. Patrick gets paid because, like I said,
Because he's doing all the work.
He does all the work, and and the responsibility, especially with COVID, has really fallen on his shoulders. So he gets paid, but like I don't get a salary. Max and Rosie don't get salaries. Like it's not about making money for us. It's about like just really having something that's really fun and delicious that we can share with people. And the only way we can do that is by having a business. And so,
Yeah.
you can't just make 5 cases of wine and share with your friends in France. The
Yeah.
logistics of that just aren't possible. So.
Well, I think it's just nice too. Like, I think it just shows what's possible. And I think that it's a way, like, I think that I assume you'll agree, like in the wine world, like, and you kind of already mentioned this, like, it can be very, like, we're all just saying the exact same thing, talking to the exact same people. And like, I think it's important to involve people outside of the wine world, in the context of like bringing new people in, as you said earlier, like they don't know that much about wine. And like, as long as they don't come in and say, hey, actually, I know everything, like as long as everyone's willing to learn, there's so much to learn from other people outside of our space as well. So I think that that's just like a really great combination. So anything else we should know before we dive into some of these specific wines?
No, I mean, I think we'll probably cover some random ground just talking about the wines when we do that. But yeah, I think it's just been a really cool project to be involved in, and to see the wine world, both from the natural wine view, but also just from winemaking and importation and distributing, so it's been intellectually really, really interesting for me.
All right, so now we're talking about our Gamay. So tell us a little bit about the MVB. I think I know why it's called that, and the history of this wine.
So MVB is Moulin Beaujolais. It comes primarily from a vineyard in Moulin. The first vintage was entirely from this one vineyard. We've made a little bit more wines. We actually had to source some grapes from a couple other places in Beaujolais, but we wanted to have some consistency. And since it's not about grapes or whatever, the abbreviation stayed the same. To me, it's just like classic, or what I consider now to be classic Beaujolais. If you've been drinking Beaujolais since like the early 2000s, what you consider classic has probably changed.
Yeah.
Early 2000s Beaujolais was like more extracted, and it saw a lot more barrel use, and just it wasn't what it is now. And classic Beaujolais today, which I know isn't really the definition of classic, but whatever. Classic Beaujolais today is this like sort of all really great Beaujolais. It sort of leans a little bit natural, or is like all the way in like ours is. So it's like crunchy textured, no oak, really fresh, hopefully lower alcohol, but that is vintage dependent more than anything else at this point. And then has like these like really dark fruits, but has a lot of spice to it as well. And then what I love about Beaujolais is it kind of looks a little opaque in the glass, and looks like it could be like a heavier wine. When you like smell it and look at it, you're like, oh, this is gonna be like rich and dense. And you taste it, and it's not like that at all. It's like light and fruity and all the things that I like about red wine. So
yeah, it just always makes me think of Thanksgiving, which I know that's just like very overly used topic of Beaujolais and Thanksgiving, but like it's just so perfect for that. So if you do cellar your wines, you could also cellar this one until Thanksgiving, because I feel like this could not be more perfect for that type of familial setting for it.
Totally. And again, like I said about our orange wine, the point of this wine is like Thanksgiving is actually a great example. Not necessarily, and if the food goes well with the food and all that, but it's about sharing, right? And it's about being with a group of people. So this is a wine that we definitely want at that table, because that's a table that things are being shared and plates are being passed around, and whatever. And so that's very much what we're going for as a wine. So the catalyst of this wine and how this came about is the first time we ever spent some time with Patrick Beaujolais in Auvergne. We tasted a lot of his Beaujolais that he made in the past, and every time we opened a bottle or pulled a tank sample, everyone in our group was like, "Wow, this wine is amazing!" And so when we were talking about what we were going to do as a project, I was like, "Everyone loved the Beaujolais. We can make some. We should definitely make some." And so that's how this kind of came about. The project was originally only orange wine, and then because of the quality of the Beaujolais, we sort of layered that into the first vintage, and then, like I said, the second vintage. And I'm really excited. And I think the first vintage was great. I think, and it's definitely Patrick and his winemaking, but it's also the vintage. I think the 2020 vintage is just delicious in Beaujolais. It's really tasty.
I think it's important to note too, for all the people that don't have their crus from Beaujolais memorized, that it's really nice that you're actually getting wines from vineyards that are, a cru. They're not just from random vineyards in the Beaujolais region or village, even. Like, these are cru level. So maybe you can speak to that a little bit as well.
Yeah, so there's two main sources and then a third small source that I'm actually more excited about the cru. But yeah, so Moulin is one of the great crus in Beaujolais. It's a heavily granitic soil, some pink quartz in it. That's what helps the wine actually be as sort of dense in color and dense in fruit, and then also be really light on the palate. And then there's another vineyard that we source grapes from in Côte de Bruy that definitely lends a little bit more beef to it, and is a little bit more savory. And then there's a third vintage that third vineyard that Patrick actually owns that is on the outskirts of the appellation. It is Beaujolais Village, but he farms it, and he sort of does all the things soup to nuts there. And so I think it is a good representation of what we're doing, that this third vineyard, it's all Patrick's work, which is cool. But again, I think it's in what we're trying to do. I think it's better that it's a blend, just because we're not trying to make Moulin au Vent. We're trying to make delicious red wine that's light and low alcohol, that's easy to drink. That if you really want to get technical and really analyze it and put some thought behind it, it's a really great Beaujolais. But it's also, if you have some friends that don't know a lot about wine, hopefully they're going to pick this up and be like, wow, this smells great, tastes great, and goes awesome with my charcuterie or my turkey and cranberry sauce, whatever's on the table.
And it looks a lot less intimidating than the big, expensive, traditional Moulin au Vents out there. So.
Totally.
All right, so you mentioned a little bit about pairing. So tell me a little bit about smell, taste, and pairing on this one as well for our people.
Yeah, so I like I said, I think this is really classic for me. I think you can smell it's almost like sweet and sour a little bit. I think whether it's you want to call it kombucha or black tea, or there's that really savory note.
Yeah.
And at the same time, there's tons of really dark red fruits, almost like stewed red fruits, and then in very different spice in the orange wine. The orange wine is that exotic ginger kind of spice to it, and this is much more like pepper and kind of, well, not red pepper. It's really black and white pepper spice to it, that makes it really interesting.
And so we'll have it for Thanksgiving. Anything, honestly, I just want to get a charcuterie plate with this. I really can't, there's all kinds of other things I know it would be great with. Beaujolais is so wonderful with all kinds of food, but especially with the aspect of just generally sharing, that one just feels so perfect. But any other ones off the top of your head that you feel would be good for this one? Oh, what about for vegetarians? That one's, I always try and think about what to put it for vegetarians, and it's always so hard.
You're in my wheelhouse.
It's important.
Since 11 Madison Park is now fully vegan.
Oh, nice.
Totally in my wheelhouse. So I think this is a great what are called nightshades. So tomatoes, eggplants, that sort of world, especially if you're cooking the tomatoes down. I think can go really well. Or grilled eggplant. I think this is a great wine for that kind of thing. But I think it's just summer season. And that backyard barbecue, if you're putting char on stuff, I think this is a great wine for that. So even if you're doing summer squash on the grill, I think this will, it's not so much the match with the summer squash itself,
right?
But more the char coming off the grill, it's perfect.
Yeah, do you know, there's so many times where I was matching like rosés and stuff with like halloumi and watermelon on the barbecue. I don't know if you've done that, but like I've been doing that all summer and it's so good. I'm just like, okay, like I need a vegetarian option. Like that's where I'm going. It's so perfect for this. So not for these wines, but just generally that's been like such a funny one that I never thought I was going to be recommending. But I try and put those in there too because we do have a lot of vegetarians and vegans in there.
So I think that this is a great wine for vegetables, right? I think the in exploring the vegan world and wines at 11 Massive Park now, we the one thing that doesn't really work with vegetables is high tannin wines. Now, that being said, if you like dense, rich Cabernet and you like vegetables, that's gonna be great, right? But if you're talking like actual, like really thoughtful and like really getting into the nitty gritty pairings, like that high alcohol, tannin kind of thing, and vegetarian forward dishes or vegan dishes is probably not the best match. So Nebbiolo, Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, like that world isn't great. And this is sort of the bridge between that, because you still have that like kind of dense, darker fruit that is on the aromatics, and then the wine itself is lighter and higher acid. Not higher acid, obviously, the Nebbiolo. I don't want to get myself.
Right. Yeah, we get what you're saying.
But so because you have that dark fruit profile and the lightness because of the acidity, it goes really well with vegetables. But for me, and this speaks more to my background than it does actually to like my intelligence in food and wine pairing. This is like bistro wine, right? Like this is like coq au vin or steak frite, like all those, like, you know, if you go to a classic French bistro, like they would always have a bunch of Beaujolais on the list, or if you just ordered a glass of red wine, you wouldn't know what you're getting. And I
probably that
it was some Beaujolais they were pouring in your glass. And so that's a food that I like can't move past when I think of what to drink with Beaujolais.
Yeah, I also have a whole category that I call junk drunk foods, where I'm like, hey, like this goes well with your drunk and you want something to drink with it, or you know, you want chicken nuggies, and that's okay. Sometimes you just need something to pair with chicken nuggies, like that happens sometimes. So there's always that. This is too nice for that, but in theory, it of course still fits into that category. If you want to go that way, sure, but that's not this deserves better than that.
No, it definitely doesn't deserve better. And I agree with what you're saying. Like this is like that last, you want to open that last bottle
kebab,
like,
you know. Yeah,
perfect.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for spending the time with us on these. I can't wait for everyone to try them. We'll link all this stuff back to you guys as well. And yeah, next year, hopefully we'll get the other two in the club instead, so everyone can try them all over time. And oh, actually, I did have one more question. Are you planning to make new or different styles of wine next year? Are you going to stick with the 4, or what's the plan, you think?
So TBD a little bit. I'll pull the curtain back a little bit. I think that we're probably just the 4 for 2021 vintage again. If you follow French weather patterns, which I hope most people don't, it's been a tough year in France. There's been a lot of frost, the entire Loire Valley, Burgundy, a little bit in the Northern Rhone, the Jura. Basically, Alsace has been saved, and that's really it. Champagne's a disaster. And so our ability to find grapes has been really severely limited. So that being said, we're probably just going to stick to 4. There may or may not be rosé pet nat coming. I'm not going to reveal too much about that. But then also because and not just me, Max and Rosie, you know, it's COVID. Like, it's hard to
be for sure.
I think we'll start working on some smaller cuvées in 2022 and trying to figure out like some really small, like interesting, different, you know, kind of things in 2022.
Nice. Well, that sounds great. Yeah, I mean, y'all already went from 2 to 4 in 1 year, so I think that you don't have to. That's already a pretty big growth. You don't have to jump back quickly. But I was just curious if there was anything else we should be looking forward to. So.
Yeah, not right away, but for sure.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for spending time with us. We can't wait for everyone to try it.
Awesome. Thank you. I can't wait for everyone to try it too.